Taliban militants are celebrating the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan. The group is setting its sights on creating a new government, but they're already facing hurdles as the UN Secretary General warns of a deepening humanitarian crisis in the country with millions in need of aid. Charlie D'Agata reports on the future of Afghanistan.
Taking over the country was the easy part. Now comes the job of running it. Like the airport, where Taliban members holding American weapons badmouth outgoing U.S. forces. As you can see, these infidels have destroyed the entire airport, he says. We had a team ready to fix this mess. Now that the Americans have gone, we're ready to clean it up. It's now a graveyard of U.S. military hardware, and bereft of the technical know-how to even get a reliable air traffic control system in place, the Taliban are now turning to Qatar and Turkey to get it back up and running. Even with flights stopped, some Afghans tried to get in. Taliban guards turned them away. Then there's the financial system. There's been a run on the banks with panicked people trying to withdraw cash in the chaos. Some have waited in line for days.
I should build a future, I should study, so definitely if the situations are like that, you should stay for 1 week just to take 10,000 Afghani, $100 from a bank, so it's not possible to live here.
With many employees now too terrified to return to work, even basic necessities like electricity and water are under threat. The UN has already warned of an absolute catastrophe of economic ruin and even famine. Yesterday, crowds attended a mock funeral held by the Taliban, coffins draped in flags of America and coalition allies. But as celebrations subside, the country may soon be facing more funerals of its own.
All right, let's bring in Charlie, who is joining us live from Doha, Qatar. So, Charlie, as we mentioned, the UN is warning about the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan. They're calling on other countries to offer aid. What's the status of aid operations in Afghanistan right now? I mean, it's something you and I and Anne-Marie have talked about for some time, gaining control of the country, of the government, of Afghanistan's resources is one thing. Administering to the people and providing a life for them is quite another.
It's administering the aid that's going to be a big issue now, because everything essentially screeched to a halt a few weeks ago, and it is getting critical. To my mind, it is the most critical phase that we're going into now. Now that you take the military conflict out of the equation, the World Food Program have said that they're marching towards starvation, in their words. And this was during the conflict itself. There is a famine in Afghanistan. They're dealing with COVID. Nobody has reported that because that's fallen to the wayside considering everything else that's going on. But there are other really pressing issues that are immediate. Let's talk about U.S. aid, what the U.S. government and international governments have been giving Afghanistan. Billions of dollars, all of those assets are now frozen. Think of the hundreds of millions of dollars that were going into propping up the Afghan security forces. All that has been frozen. Then you have to decide and trust that the Taliban, if they were to even get this aid, that they're going to distribute it, that you trust that they're going to distribute it, and then that they have the means to distribute it. And I think what the concern is here for the UN, the United States, the government is absolutely going to have to deal with this. And I'm not talking about weeks, talking about days, because it's so pressing, is how they get this aid to Afghanistan and how they distribute the aid to the places that are going to need it most. There is rampant corruption, was anyway, in the Afghan government, and we're now dealing with a government that hasn't even been formed yet. They simply don't have the kind of manpower to be able to distribute aid. Not just cash, but we're talking about literally food, water, getting it to the places that need it most.
So, speaking of the government that has not been formed yet, the Taliban says it's days away from announcing the new government. Do we have any idea how that government will be organized or who will be holding top positions?
Anne-Marie, they don't even know what the government is going to look like. Is it going to be based on something like, a parliamentary government? That's likely, based on the government that we the outgoing government, the Afghan government, of course, the Taliban are going to want to be in charge, but they also understand they're going to have to appoint ministers. They've already said that they will not allow high-ranking female ministers to hold the highest positions. As far as who's going to hold them, they're not going to name names yet, but we know that Hamid Karzai, remember Hamid Karzai, the former president, he is in the mix. He's currently negotiating with the Taliban, and they're going to need that for a reason I'll get into in a minute. Abdullah, who's part of the Reconciliation Committee. So he's been dealing with the Taliban for years through all of this. He stayed on. He didn't flee the country. The reason the Taliban need both of these gentlemen and more is they've already said they're going to need an inclusive government. Remember, the first priority they have right now is to make sure that they can run the country. They, by their own admission, they said that they hadn't realized that it would come this quickly. They really haven't had time to form a government or what it's going to look like, or whether there's going to be some sort of interim government, whether there's going to be some semblance of democracy within that government. But they are dealing with a wide variety of ethnic groups that they're going to have to make sure is at least gives the appearance of representation across the population. Not just because they're going to have to placate the population itself, but they're going to have to give the appearance to the international community that there's an inclusivity there. But most importantly, and this is where it really, really becomes critical, they need to get things done. You know, we talk about the government as it's an abstract notion, but it's a governance. You're going to need a foreign minister. You're going to need a health minister. You're going to need, for us, for journalists, you're going to need a minister of information. How do you start imposing the laws or even suggesting what the laws are going to be? Then you introduce Sharia law, and there will be elements of the Taliban, including the Haqqani network, who will want to have not just a piece of the pie, but one of the biggest pieces of the pie. And there are elements within that Haqqani network who are wanted terrorists by the United States. Now you're going to form a government that includes possible wanted terrorists from the United States. That's not going to work. The brother of one of the wanted terrorists is currently running security for Kabul. You can see how complicated this is getting, and they need to get this in place within a matter of days.
Charlie, we're going to have to wrap up our conversation because there's a pressing news conference on the Caldor fire in California, but we'll certainly be talking to you throughout the course of the day and weeks ahead as we look to see how the Taliban actually puts things into place in Afghanistan. Charlie D'Agata in Doha, as always, we appreciate it, my friend. Thank you.